Welcome to another episode of the NOYC GODcast. Today is a very, very special episode. Probably, as you already know, today is Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
We should have totally got like rabbit ears or something.
We should have. Something about bunnies.
So, just a fair warning, today's episode is, it's a special edition, right? It's an Easter edition, so it is going to be a little bit longer than normal, but it'll be worth it, I promise. So, what's your guys' favorite part of Easter?
Favorite part of Easter? I do like the, coming here and having, breakfast.
Breakfast is always good.
Breakfast is good.
Yeah. We usually do sunrise, and then we do breakfast, and then we have regular service after that.
I like coming to church when it's still dark.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's as dark as when I was a child, but I just like the idea of getting up early and getting to church early.
Well, you're just up longer.
What you didn't know was growing up, we blindfolded you on the way to church. We didn't know that.
Possible, I don't know.
So any favorite memories besides the blindfolding?
I don't know. I missed everything.
Favorite Easter memories?
I liked the year that we had the outside service, just because most of my life, all of the Easters were kind of the same.
Yeah.
And that was kind of something
very
unique.
Definitely. Our church was dumb enough. We actually made, this is so dumb. I wish we had, you have one.
I still have one.
We actually made custom face masks that said Easter 2020 on them, which was...
And we handed out donuts with gloves.
Yeah. It's kind of hilarious looking back, but that will be a memory for sure. So no doubt today, millions of people around the world, they're celebrating Easter in different ways. Some churches celebrate with a Good Friday service. Maybe you have a sunrise service. Maybe you had a Easter breakfast. Maybe you did an Easter drama or play. Maybe you had some kind of kids program. Maybe your church might offer an Easter egg hunt. Maybe your family gets together for a nice lunch. Maybe you give the kids Easter baskets or the adults Easter baskets. Easter's pretty special. In fact, according to GoBankingRates.com, which I don't know who that is, but they said this.
Obviously reliable.
Obviously. GoBankingRates.com says that Americans spent $21.7 billion with a B dollars in 2020 on Easter alone. Now, that's 2020, so you figure that's probably lesser than normal. 21.7 billion.
You didn't have to buy nice outfits. You're just in your sweatpants.
PJs. There was the 21 billion of that was just pajamas. A lot of
Reese's egg.
Oh, I was thinking Peeps.
Oh, no, those are gross. Don't do that.
Well, you still have to buy them.
You don't
rabbit
have to.
eggs.
Dude,
You buy them, you put them in the trash.
It's a part of Easter.
You let them get hard and moldy in the corner, and then you throw them away.
I don't think they ever mold.
Yeah, I don't know that they mold.
You know what? They're like a, was it McDonald's hamburger that never molds?
I think anything from McDonald's is
Yeah,
mold.
that's true. So according to the National Retail Association, the average person, so this is for an individual, the average person spends $179.70 on Easter per person. So not even family, right? Just per person. $180 on Easter. That's hundreds of pieces.
What are you buying?
I know. I'm thinking I don't even know what I would.
Prices of ham.
That's a lot of ham. So all month we've been looking at the cost of Christianity, and the tough truth that we've kind of been diving into is that a lot of times as believers, we kind of neglect the fact that it's pretty expensive to have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
In fact, it always has been expensive. We went all the way back to Cain and Abel. We went to the Old Testament with the commandments. It has always been expensive if you want to have a relationship with God. You can't really say, you know what, I want to have a relationship with you, but discount rack, coupon codes. No, it's expensive to have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
But today, I want to just take the time to reflect on the fact that it's not just expensive to us. It's expensive to God himself to have a relationship with us. In fact, he was willing to pay the price in order to have a relationship with us. A lot of times we get up in an uproar because, God expects this of us. He's asking that of us. We think that, laying down our lives is that's too much. But have we forgotten that God himself paid a high price? Christ paid a high price in order that we could be saved. And so really, before ever coming to earth, before ever putting on flesh and bone, right? Jesus was living in the perfection of paradise in God's presence. But before Jesus would ever be born in a dirty barn, first, Jesus counted the cost of Christianity. Think about that. That is really, really mind-blowing. He counted the cost of Christianity. And he decided that the plan was worth the price. Redeeming mankind would be worth the expensive effort. Yeah. And I'm aware that a lot of people shy away. They totally turn off their brain when it comes to hearing how Christ was tortured right on the cross. I know a lot of people who won't watch, the Passion. A lot of people, don't like when Easter portrays that. And obviously, we can take that to a level that's unhealthy. But I guess what I want to challenge us with today is that God put that in his word because he wanted us to remember how expensive this thing was. And so to neglect how high a price he paid by being tortured, we're really neglecting to recognize that we're supposed to pay a steep price to be a Christian. Like, is that fair?
Yeah. I would say that if you take that out, it's easy to have a relaxed Christianity or something that's just a shadow of a Christianity.
Well, I mean, there's a reason people shy away from it. It's uncomfortable to know that he did that for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? He did that for me.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
it's so, the Bible is in depth about it and how gory it can be, and that's why people don't like to read it. Like when I read it, there in Mark for our comprehension plan, we had to read it every single day for 30 days. And that's not very comfortable to keep reading it over and over again because that was for me. But I think that that's a reason that he put it in there.
And Peter, I actually wish I would have had this verse in here now that I'm thinking about it. Peter writes that in the book of Acts, and when he is preaching, he says, "You did this." He just keeps telling them, he's like, "You nailed him to the cross. You crucified him. Like, this is your fault." And like, though he was talking to the actual people. That's all of us. And like, that is what we need to grasp is today, Easter, this month, when you're learning about Easter, learning about what Christ did for you. Like that wasn't it was, but it wasn't just a historical scene from thousands of years ago. Factually, that was you. Factually, you nailed him to that cross. Factually, it was your sins that held him here. Factually, it was you who put the crown of thorns. Factually, you're the reason he endured this. And yet he said, you are worth the price. And so today, I really just want to share what Jesus endured. And no doubt a lot of us have heard this over the last several days, I hope. But I really just want to take our focus on the cost of the cross that Christ paid for Christianity. If you're young, you might want to go ask mom and dad before you go any further. We're not going to show anything bad, but we are going to just share what the cost was to Christ. And so we know that before ever making it to the cross, right, Jesus, he was betrayed and he was totally sold out by his dearest friends. And like, I think that's really even just stopping there. Like, that's hard for us to grasp. Like, this guy was someone that Jesus actually chose. Like, I mean, we don't pick disciples for ourselves, but like dodgeball, right? You pick someone, you think they're a good pick, and then they totally mess the whole game up. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Jesus picked this guy. And not only did he pick him, but Jesus spent his whole life with this guy, night and day. Not only did he spend his life with him, he trusted him. He gave him the money to hold on to. He trusted him with the position. Not only that, but Jesus literally is going to take his very short life and he's going to pour it into this guy. And even though all of that is true, we're going to find that Judas goes on and he stabs Jesus in the back. He totally betrays Jesus. He gives him a kiss on the cheek in jest, right, to totally just be sarcastic about the whole thing. And so, like, that would have been hard enough. So then we fast forward, and Jesus is arrested, right? And after Jesus is arrested, he goes on, and he's beaten. And not just like a little shiner. Jesus is badly beaten. So first off, Jesus would have been stripped of his clothing completely. In a lot of the movies we see, you got the loincloth thing going on. There were no boxers. There were no briefs. There was no loincloth. Jesus was completely stripped, completely exposed to the entire world. And then Jesus' hands would have been tied above his head to a post. And there, with his arms tied above him like that, his back would have been stretched out, right? So his
More
back...
area.
What?
More area.
Oh, yeah. She said malaria. I'm like, I don't remember that he had malaria.
May have.
I don't know what version you're reading. So his hands are tied above his head, making his back stretched. Like his skin is stretched at the max. And like, the further your skin stretched, the more pain it causes. So that would have allowed the maximum damage as the whips would have hit him. And so using this cat of nine tails, right, which is just pieces of leather cord that has stones and nails and glass woven into it. They would have taken that and they would have whipped him with it. And the whip would have literally shredded the skin on his back. And then it would have wrapped around his front and it would have shredded the skin on his chest. And then it would have hit his legs and his shoulders. And so literally the glass and the stone and the bones would have just literally dug in and ripped out of his skin. And so literally his skin was being removed. The whip would have been so severe that the tissue and the veins would have actually been cut. And so blood would have been pouring everywhere. And in fact, typically they would have went on to whip him so badly that the muscles of his body would have actually been exposed. Like we get a little paper cut and we're like, ooh, that burns.
Hand sanitizer.
Or get a Band-Aid, like whatever. Yeah. Like literally they took skin off, tissue off, veins, all the way down to the muscle. So not only was Jesus exposed like his physical, but his inwards were exposed.
Yeah.
And so the back of Jesus would have literally looked like it went through a shredder. Literally, blood would have been pouring out violently from his wounds, not just a trickle, violent exposure, violent bleeding from these wounds. And so that, from such a blood loss, right, that would have caused Jesus to be disoriented and even faint. So now he's woozy on top of being in so much pain. But that wasn't enough. So they go on from there. And what do they do next? They take Jesus, right? Jesus is literally God. He's literally the Son of God. He's literally God in flesh. The maker, the creator of all things, right? We read in Colossians that before all things, Jesus was. Jesus, all things were created for him and by him and to him. Jesus was literally, it's all about him. This is the guy at the top of the pyramid. This is the epitome of everything. And they take this guy and they mercilessly mock him. Yep. They publicly humiliate him among his peers, among his parent, among his friends, among his followers, right? They made fun of him. They called him a liar. They called him a fake and a fraud and a failure in front of the people he taught, like in front of the people that he had healed, in front of the people whose lives he'd changed, the people he'd ministered to. They totally humiliated him. I mean, you guys, with camp and the ministry and things, there are people who look up to you. Like, is that fair? You don't know whether to shake your head or not.
You're like, no. For legal reasons, no.
But if you're teaching, think of your pastor. If someone is teaching to you, you just regularly, you'll look up to them.
Yep.
Jesus was the epitome of that, like the max as that gets. And so like literally he's healing people. He's teaching them. He's speaking on God's behalf. He's pouring his life into people. And then they come and mock him and humiliate him and make him look like a fraud and a fake and a liar. Yeah. Like, that would have been hard to swallow, hard to take on the cheek. And then they go further, right? So the guards, they took matters a step further and they placed a crown of thorns on his head. This wasn't normal for the crucifixion, but they wanted to do it in jest because he was supposed to be the supposed king of the Jews. And so, hey, here's your crown. And so they take this thorn crown and they place it on the flesh of Jesus' head and brow. And again, that would have you guys know what thorns are like. That would have literally dug into his skin. The skin on your head is tight. Like that's how that works. And so, it would have dug in, probably hitting bone if the thorns were deep enough. And so again, we see blood gushing out of those wounds now. And so now he's bleeding from his head, he's bleeding from his back and his front and his legs, and he's disoriented. And now the blood's pouring from his head and it's going into his eyes and it's going into his nose and it's going into his mouth. And so his eyes and nose are burning. He can't breathe well. He's tasting his own blood. And then they place a scepter, right? So for a king, they place a scepter into his hand. Again, in jest. And later on, they'll take that scepter and they'll actually beat him over the head with it. And so as they beat him over the head with the scepter, it pushes those thorns even in deeper and deeper and deeper. That wasn't enough, though. This wasn't enough humiliation. They go and they get a robe. This would have been something that a king would have wore, right? And so they get this royal robe and they put it on his torn back. And so as they put the robe on his bleeding, exposed, ripped to shreds back, that robe would have adhered to the wounds, right? The blood would have it would have stuck. And so that would have been painful just to have I don't know how you guys are. If you get a cut, like it doesn't feel good having anything touch it.
I don't even like Band-Aids.
Yeah, exactly. And so this would have adhered. It would have stuck, sealed to his body. But then they go and rip it off of him. And so it reopens all these wounds all over again and it starts bleeding, all in jest, all in ridicule, all in humiliation, just being sarcastic, mocking his royalty as if to say, yeah, some king you are. Jesus would have went on and he would have faced embarrassment like we never can imagine. Embarrassment to a level that no one has ever faced before. And what I want us to realize is yes, he was God, but he was also 100% man.
Yep.
Which means that Jesus felt every emotion that you would have felt had that been you. And he felt every flush of feelings that you would have felt. Not only physically, but emotionally and mentally, right? Spiritually. He faced all of these horrible things as a real man. He didn't have any superpowers. He wasn't super enabled. He was a man, 100% man. He felt this. And yet he said, I'm willing to pay the price. So this would have led then, we know that Jesus goes on and he literally is going to live out his own words, right? We know that Jesus was discipling and teaching to people. He said, those who want to be my followers, they have to go on and carry their cross. Well, Jesus is going to live his own words. He's going to go and they're going to place this huge piece of lumber across his back and on his shoulders. And then they're actually going to tie this tough and rough timber to his shoulders. And so as Jesus would have been led through the streets in front of this angry mob, right? He's naked, he's bleeding, he's barely conscious from blood loss. And so now, because of this blood loss, Jesus starts to stumble. He's unsteady. And so as he stumbles, that causes the rough wood, the splinters from that beam to push into the wounds. I mean, like you said, you don't like a Band-Aid. I don't like a Band-Aid. Like when you have a cut, you don't like anything on it. Imagine having rough wood on it. Like let alone nice soft Band-Aids. Like a rough wood, splinters pushing into his wounds. And so that causes splinters to break off into his wounds and push into his back and his shoulders. But that wasn't enough. Here in America today, I don't know about today, but in America, we have what's known as the death penalty, right? And today, in modern day, that's done by a lethal injection. And so someone faces the death penalty, they actually are treated very well. They're made very comfortable. They're treated with utmost respect and human dignity. And so before they're quietly put to death, they're given a last meal, like they're quieted down, they can talk to someone, all these things. And so we've made death politically correct. Is that fair? We've made it very humane. This was not that. This was definitely not that. In fact, I actually didn't know. I was doing some research on this. I thought this was rather fascinating. The crucifixion actually it predates the Roman days. So in fact, the crucifixion can be dated all the way back to the days of Esther. I don't know if you guys remember the story of Esther, where Haman is hung on his house. Haman is hung on his gallows, not his hollows. I can't say that. Haman is hung on his gallows. I don't know. It's so hard. I think we read that and we're like, well, he's hung, right? Yeah. That was a little graphic. We think of that as like a hangman noose, like you're playing hangman with the kids. Why would we ever play such graphic games? Like I was thinking about the other day, I'm like, okay, it's not an axe. Oh, you gotta go. You didn't want to go hang the stick figure. Yeah, like that was a little graphic. We would not be allowed to play that today.
And I still can't spell.
No wonder all the men hung. Anyways, so the crucifixion can be traced back to the days of Esther. So Haman is hung on his gallows. This gallows, again, is not a Western-style hangman noose kind of thing. It was actually the original crucifixion, which I found rather fascinating. So literally, this is a little bit gross to think. I don't like this. The person literally would have been taken and impaled on a pole. That's how it started. So you take a... I know. I read that, I'm like, oh, I don't like that.
What is it? A kebab.
A popsicle. A kebab. That's graphic too. It literally though, they literally would skewer a person. They would just stick them on the pole, and that's what happened to Haman. That's what would happen back in the days of Esther. And so a few hundred years go by, and the Greeks hear about this form of torture, and they hear of the crucifixion, and they're like, you know what? We can make it even more painful. And so under Alexander the Great, they develop an even more cruel form of the crucifixion. Well, the Romans caught word of what the Greeks are doing, and the Romans are like, you ain't seen nothing yet. And so the Romans took the crucifixion and they actually studied it anatomically. And so they literally got scientific about it, and they found the most perfect persecution that the body could humanly go through without dying and just barely surviving. So taking you as far to the brink of death as possible without death. And so this torture would take you right up to the brink of death. I said that already. And so this is the way that Jesus dies. This is the price he would be willing to pay for our Christianity. So we know that Jesus would have been thrown. So all of this has already happened, right? All the bleeding back and the embarrassment and the reopened wounds and the bleeding from everywhere. Jesus is then taken and he's thrown backwards with that tied to him. He's thrown backwards onto this giant rough wooden beam. Again, his bleeding shoulders are tightly pressed onto that rough, coarse wood. And then, this part always gets me, and I'm a little squeamish about these kinds of things. Anyways, so then...
Oh, no.
So then the soldier would have literally gone and start feeling the arm of Jesus, looking for... You can take them away. I wanted to know what an arm looked like. Looking for a very specific placement of a nail. You know, a lot of times we see them, they're through the hands, or they're just, just hung up. Or a lot of shows you see them tied to the to the thing. They would have literally intentionally looked for just the right place, because if they put that nail in just the right place, it would have bore the entire weight of his body, and it would have sent shock waves to every part of his body, making this intense burning sensation because the nerves were pressed by the nail. And so Jesus now is attached to the cross by his wrists. His back is pressed into this coarse wood. His entire weight is being held on that painful place on his wrists. So then they take him. He's on the cross now. They take him. He's laying flat, and the movies a lot of times portray this. He's laying on the cross. So now they're going to pick it up, and they literally would just throw it into place. Like it would just slide and jolt into place. Can you imagine your entire body weight just being jostled on that painful place? I can't even the human mind really cannot fathom what that was like. He paid that price for us. So then again, this again grosses me out. So then they would have taken his feet.
Do you want to see our feet?
I kind of do, actually. Not sure if Benjamin's feet would be fine, but yours wouldn't fit on the table. So then, with his feet facing downward, they would have taken a nail and they would have forced it through the arch of his feet so that his knees would have been slightly bent. They didn't want you straight. They wanted your knees slightly bent. So again, all that weight's now on the nail through his 2 feet. And so again, Jesus is hanging on the cross. He's bearing his entire body weight upon these 3 torturous nails. And so they're forcing him to lift himself up on those nails every time he needed to take a painstaking breath. Literally, the God who breathed life into all of us, the God who breathed life into anything who's ever lived, now has to endure such miserable pain just to gather a breath in his human body. Each minute would have been uniquely agonizing and completely filled with the worst torture, the worst pain that could ever be brought upon a person. And he paid that price for us. And so beyond the physical pain, right, Jesus endured loneliness. And it's a loneliness that really is just beyond our comprehension. Not only did the very people he poured his life into turn their backs on him, not only did his closest friends deny him, not only did they leave, and so Jesus looks on and there's no one on his side, no one came to his defense, right? No one speaks out for him. And so no doubt that was difficult. Like, if you guys betrayed me, that would hurt. They all betrayed him. The people he thought would be there for him, the people who said, I'll never leave your side, they betrayed him. They turned on him. They did not defend his honor. And so we read of no one coming to his aid, no one speaking in his defense. And I know that had to be difficult. And yet so much worse, we have to grasp this, so much worse was the lonely separation that Jesus endured from his heavenly Father.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a lot of times where we disconnect with the part of the story. Yes, the pain was difficult. Mm-hmm. Yes, the torture was embarrassing. But Jesus was separated from God. Mm-hmm. We know from reading the New Testament that from the very beginning of creation, right, Jesus was with God. From the very beginning. I think a lot of times we read the Bible and we're like, well, when he became the baby, then, you know what I mean? Like, it was different. No, he'd always been with God, always and at all times. We read in the book of John that at all things that Jesus did, he says, I am with the Father is with me. I do what the Father says. I say what the Father, like he was always completely in perfect unity with God at all times. There was never a time when there was a distance in their relationship. And yet, in order to save mankind, in order to give us eternal salvation, in order to pay the price, Jesus had to endure maybe the most costly expense of all, and that was separation from God. Mm-hmm. And so while on the cross, we don't find Jesus crying out for relief. We don't find him agonizing or screaming over the pain of the cross, though no doubt he could have. This is what we hear Jesus crying out on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? That was the cost he was willing to pay for us. And so when Christ is up on the cross, he bore our sins upon himself. God actually turns his back on Jesus. He removes his presence from Jesus. And for the first time ever since the beginning of creation, Jesus separated himself from God. And no doubt the thorns hurt. No doubt the whipping was horrible. And sure, the nails in his wrist, they would have been excruciating. But this cost was incomprehensible. To be separated from God, though he had always been perfect, though he had always been one with God, that was the steepest price of all. And yet Jesus paid it willingly. Knowing in advance, Jesus willingly paid the price to save us. He made a way where there was no way, right? He made a way to do what none of us would be able to do in ourselves. If that would be the cost for us to have a relationship with God, we can never pay that cost. And so we could never have a relationship with God. And Jesus said, I'm perfect, but I will pay the price of Christianity, knowing that we never could. Christianity is costly for all parties involved. God doesn't just ask us to pay some crazy price to lay down our lives because he's cruel, because he just is greedy. He says, listen, I'm all in on this thing. I'm fully invested. I'm totally all in. And I want you to be too. And so for Christ, for God, for the Father, for those he's redeemed, there is a cost to Christianity. And so to accept a Christianity, that's what we've been talking about all month this month. To accept a Christianity that has no cost is to not accept Christianity at all. Is that fair? And so how it really is just a slap in God's face when we claim Christianity, but we're unwilling to sacrifice and we're unwilling to surrender and we're unwilling to lay down our lives on his behalf, because even though he paid such a premium price, we're not willing to pay the price at all. And so as the Easter season wraps up and a lot of us turn our eyes, to what's coming in summer and springtime's over with, may we not forget the cost of the cross. May we never, may it be in the forefront of our minds every moment of every day, how much he endured on our behalf. May we never forget his willingness to pay what was premeditated, right? To pay the cost and to count it before he would ever pay it in order for us to be Christians. Well, today, any comments? Like, I know that was kind of more lesson-y than podcasty. Y'all are just showing your arms. We have those.
Offering the feet.
Oh.
No, I think that one of the things is, I always have something. No, I was just thinking, like, it is the biggest cost for him was being separated from God. So in our lives, I think that's where we miss the mark. So like for us, it is the physical things. We think the physical things are the big deal. But when we're not in the will of God, we're separated from him.
Right.
So that should be the thing that we're worried about. Not worrying about, are we going to be able to give up this thing because it's whatever. We should be worried that we're not going to be close to God.
So you could say it this way, which is rather a fascinating thought. You could say that he paid the cost to save us the cost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like basically he was willing to be separated from God so that we didn't have to be separated from God. He paid it to save us. So all we see is, like you said, the physical. I have to lay down my life. I have to give up this sin. I have to give up this and this and this. No, he actually saved you from what he went through in order for you to have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
I just think a lot of times we think it's one-sided when God's like, yeah, really, it's more my-sided, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
He paid the price first.
Yep.
Yep, he did.
Nothing? Don't you love Jesus?
I do, very much so.
It doesn't seem like it sometimes.
No, she loves Jesus. Sometimes Jesus wants you to be quiet.
Yes.
Oh, now she has something to say.
I feel like becoming a preacher.
I don't think this smack me is what I thought was going to happen. All right, today's considerable quote is by Spurgeon. He says this: while others are congratulating themselves, I have to sit humbly at the foot of the cross and marvel that I am even saved at all. I think I use this song as a featured content every year. I think this is like our second year. But this is one of my favorite hymns, and it really is just so beautiful what we're talking about today. It's by Alight, and it's called How Deep the Father's Love for Us. Today's challenge of challenge. Charge up, Chad.
The thing you need to do this week.
Yeah, that one. Next time you're struggling, catch this. Next time you're struggling with your salvation, maybe it's because of a sin, maybe it's a stipulation, maybe it's surrender, whatever it is that you're going through, I want you to stop for a minute. And I want you to consider what Jesus endured on your behalf. And so when you think you can't go any further, when it seems like there's no hope, picture Jesus on the cross and recognize the extent that he went to so that you could endure.
Yep.
Jesus said, it is finished, right? He said, it's done. He said, I'm the author and the finisher of your salvation. And so when you're struggling, right, you have a sin, you have a burden, you have a trial, recognize that he finished it.
Yep.
He's the author and the finisher of your faith. And so it is finished. Well, friends, happy Easter.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in today. We hope that you are continuing to count the cost and to pay the price for Christianity. We have one more episode this month.
Yep.
Next week's going to be a fun episode, so make sure to tune back in. Yep. We would love for you to share this episode that others could be encouraged as well. Till next time, we'll see you.
Bye.